Somewhere in Tokyo tonight, a man is paying $200 to eat a fish that could kill him before dessert. He knows the risk. That's the point. The fish on his plate carries a poison with no antidote, one that, drop for drop, is far deadlier than cyanide. A single fish holds enough of it to kill dozens of grown adults. There is no cure. If it reaches him, he will stay fully conscious, fully aware, while his own body slowly stops moving. First, the lips go numb, then the hands, then the lungs. And yet the restaurant is full, booked weeks in advance. People are on a waiting list to eat the thing that might be their last meal. This is fugu, the pufferfish. In Japan, it is a delicacy so prized that chefs train for years just to be allowed to touch it. It has killed celebrated actors, haunted poets, and it is so dangerous that the Emperor of Japan himself is forbidden from ever eating it. So how did a fish that can stop your heart become one of the most expensive meals on earth? Why would anyone take the risk? And why, after everything we now know, is it still legal at all? Welcome to Poison Pantry. Let's open the file on fugu. To understand fugu, you first have to understand what's actually in it. The poison is called tetrodotoxin. It's not something the pufferfish invents on its own. The fish collects it, concentrating it from bacteria in the food it eats over its lifetime, and stores it in its organs: the liver, the ovaries, the intestines, the skin, the parts that, in almost any other fish, you'd simply cook and eat. Tetrodotoxin works by attacking the nervous system. Your nerves fire by moving sodium in and out of their cells. Tetrodotoxin jams that mechanism shut. The signals stop. And when the signals stop, the muscles stop, including the ones you never think about, the ones that keep your chest rising and falling. Here is the cruel part. The poison does not touch the brain's ability to stay awake. So a person dying of tetrodotoxin poisoning can remain completely conscious, aware of everything, while paralysis climbs up the body. There are documented cases of victims who appeared dead, no movement, no visible breath, who could still hear the doctors standing over them. There is no antidote, none. The only treatment modern medicine offers is to put the patient on a ventilator, keep the air moving artificially, and wait. If the body can outlast the poison, the person lives. If not, they don't. That is what sits on the plate. People have been eating fugu for a very, very long time, long before anyone understood why it sometimes killed them. Archaeologists have found pufferfish bones in Japanese shell mounds dating back thousands of years. The Japanese have known this fish and the danger of it since prehistory. For most of that history, eating it was a gamble taken on instinct and hard-won family knowledge, passed down without any real science behind it. Here's what most people miss. Fugu was never eaten because it tastes overwhelming. It doesn't. The flesh is mild, almost restrained. The thing people chase is the texture. Sliced thin enough to read through, it comes off the plate with a firm, springy resistance that nothing else in the sea gives you. Chefs lay those slices in overlapping rings, like the petals of a chrysanthemum, so the dark plate shows through the flesh. You are meant to see the plate through your dinner. And in a country where the best fish often went to people with money and rank, pufferfish were something else entirely. They came up in coastal nets by the basketful, cheap, common, everywhere. The most dangerous fish in Japanese waters was also, for centuries, a poor man's catch. That's the collision that makes this whole story. A fish anyone could afford. A fish that could kill anyone who handled it wrong. In a country that ate fish at nearly every meal. By the time of Japan's feudal era, fugu had a reputation. Delicious and deadly. And the authorities noticed. During the rule of the samurai, a death from fugu was not treated as an accident. If a samurai died from eating pufferfish, it was considered a disgraceful, foolish way to go, and his family could lose their inheritance and their standing. A warrior was supposed to die in battle, not face down in a bowl of fish. Then came the sharpest response of all. When Japan's warlords were consolidating power, fugu was outlawed, and that prohibition, in various forms, would last for centuries. There were long stretches where eating this fish wasn't just risky, it was a crime. The ban that mattered most has a war attached to it. As Japan's warlords massed their armies on the southern coast for a campaign overseas, soldiers from inland provinces, men who had never seen a pufferfish in their lives, camped by the sea and ate whatever the water gave them. Enough of them died that the order came down forbidding it outright, not out of concern for anybody's dinner, for the war effort. They were losing fighting men to a fish. That order set the tone for the next several centuries. Domain after domain wrote its own version. Punishments ran from confiscated property to the collapse of a family's entire standing. And still, people ate it. In back rooms, under other names, out of bowls nobody wrote down. The strange thing is, none of it worked. The bans didn't stop people. If anything, the danger only sharpened the appeal. Fugu didn't just kill anonymous diners, it killed famous ones, and that's a large part of why we remember it. The most legendary case involves one of Japan's most celebrated kabuki actors of the 20th century. In the 1970s, he sat down at a restaurant and ordered multiple servings of fugu liver, the single most poisonous part of the fish. He reportedly believed he could handle it, that he was somehow immune. He was not immune. He died that night over several agonizing hours. Because he was a designated national treasure, his death forced Japan to tighten its fugu laws yet again. And fugu haunted the poets too. Japan's great haiku masters wrote about the strange thrill of surviving a fugu dinner, the wonder of waking up the next morning still alive after eating something that might have killed you. That is the emotional heart of fugu. It has never really been about flavor alone. It's about walking right up to the edge of death and stepping back. The faint tingle that good fugu is said to leave on the lips is, to its devotees, a reminder of exactly how close that edge is. And that brings us to the most revealing rule of all. In Japan, one specific person is forbidden from ever eating fugu, no matter how it's prepared, no matter who prepares it: the emperor. The nation decided that the life of its head of state is simply too important to risk on a fish. Everyone else may gamble, he may not. If the fish is this dangerous, the obvious question is, how does anyone serve it safely at all? The answer is one of the most demanding culinary training systems in the world. In Japan, you cannot simply decide to cook fugu. To prepare it for the public, a chef must earn a special license, and earning it is brutal. Depending on the region, aspiring chefs apprentice for years under a licensed master before they're even allowed to sit the exam. They learn the anatomy of the fish by heart. They learn which organs hold the poison, how to remove them without nicking them, how to rinse away every trace, and how to identify dozens of different pufferfish species, because each one hides its poison in slightly different places. Then comes the test. There is a written section on species and toxicology, a practical section where the chef must break down a fugu cleanly under time pressure, separating the deadly parts from the safe ones. And in the traditional version of the exam, a final step that makes the stakes unmistakable: the chef must eat the fish they just prepared. The pass rate is famously low. People train for years and still fail. And here's the part that surprises people. There is no single national license. Japan handed the rules to its prefectures, which means this fish is governed differently depending on which stretch of coastline you happen to be standing on. What a chef may legally serve in one prefecture, they may not be allowed to serve in the next one over. Some regions permit parts of certain species that other regions forbid outright. A chef who moves cities may have to qualify all over again. It is one of the very few foods on Earth where the law changes shape as you drive down the coast. That license is the entire reason fugu can exist on a menu. Every safe plate of fugu represents a person who spent years learning to hold your life in their hands and proved it. For all that training, people still die. The victims are almost never restaurant customers. Licensed chefs are extraordinarily careful, and deaths in proper fugu restaurants are vanishingly rare. The danger lives somewhere else, in the homes of amateurs. Most fugu poisonings in Japan happen when someone catches a pufferfish themselves and decides to prepare it at home. No license, no training, just confidence that they know enough. they don't. Every year, a handful of these home cooks end up in hospital. Some of them don't come back. The symptoms follow a grimly predictable path. Within minutes to a few hours, it starts with tingling or numbness in the lips and tongue, the very sensation that fugu lovers chase in tiny, controlled doses. Then the numbness spreads to the face and limbs, speech slurs. The victim may stay perfectly clear-headed while losing control of their own body, piece by piece. Then comes the difficulty breathing. And if no one gets them onto a ventilator in time, that is where it ends. There is a dark detail here that shows up again and again in the records. Because the paralysis can mimic death so completely, there are historical accounts of fugu victims being declared dead and coming back. In some places, tradition once held that a body should be left for a few days before burial, just in case the person lying there could still hear you. There's a second group of victims, and they're harder to write about because nothing went wrong by accident. Every so often a diner leans across a counter and asks quietly for the liver, the one part the law is most emphatic about, because they want the tingle at full strength. Sometimes a chef says yes. Restaurants have lost their licenses over it. Chefs have been prosecuted over it. And people have died over it, in kitchens that were doing everything correctly, right up until the moment they agreed to do one thing wrong. That's the uncomfortable truth underneath fugu's safety record. It isn't holding because the fish got less dangerous. It's holding because thousands of people every single night keep choosing not to make one specific exception. That is what's at stake every single time this fish is served. If a fish this deadly staying legal for 2,000 years is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. Every week on Poison Pantry, we open the file on another food the world tried to ban. Now, back to the fugu. For most of fugu's history, safety came down to one thing: the skill of the person holding the knife. But in the 20th century, science started to catch up with the fish. Researchers finally isolated and named the poison, tetrodotoxin, and began to map exactly how it worked and where in the fish it hid. That knowledge turned fugu preparation from an art passed down by feel into something closer to a precise, teachable procedure. Licensing exams could now be built on real toxicology instead of tradition alone. Then came an even stranger discovery. Scientists realized the pufferfish doesn't actually manufacture its own poison. It acquires it, through its diet, from toxin-producing bacteria in the food chain, which led to an astonishing experiment. If you raise pufferfish in carefully controlled tanks, feeding them a diet free of those bacteria, the fish grow up almost completely non-toxic. That's right. There is now such a thing as poison-free farmed fugu, which sets up a genuine debate inside Japan. To purists, the entire point of fugu is the danger, the tingle, the edge, the trust you place in the chef. Take away the poison, and you take away the soul of the dish. To others, non-toxic fugu is simple common sense. All the delicacy, none of the death. The fish that built its entire legend on being deadly is now, quietly, being bred to be safe. For most of its history, fugu was Japan's problem and Japan's pleasure. But food travels, and so does danger. Pufferfish and their poison show up all over the world. Tetrodotoxin poisonings have been recorded far outside Japan, wherever people eat pufferfish without knowing which parts to fear. In several countries, poisonings have come not from restaurants, but from mislabeled fish sold in markets, where a toxic pufferfish was passed off as something harmless. As Japanese cuisine spread across the globe, fugu became a kind of forbidden trophy for adventurous eaters, a thing you could brag about surviving. And it has already happened here. Pufferfish has turned up in American kitchens under a completely different name, sold as an ordinary cheap fish, in packaging that had crossed an ocean before anyone looked closely at what was inside it. People got sick. Regulators pulled the product off the shelves. The fish had not announced itself. It never does. That's the part that should unsettle you. In a licensed restaurant in Osaka, everyone in the room knows precisely what is on the plate and precisely what it could do. The danger is labeled, priced, and agreed to. In a mislabeled freezer case in a suburban grocery store, nobody knows anything at all. The most tightly controlled food in Japan becomes the least controlled food in the world the moment it slips out of the system built to control it. Somebody knew. They just didn't say it out loud. And that demand ran straight into a wall of very nervous regulators, especially in one country. Which brings us to America. The United States does not take chances with fugu. For years, importing pufferfish into America was effectively off the table. American regulators treated tetrodotoxin as exactly what it is, a lethal poison with no antidote. And the default answer was no. Today, fugu can legally enter the United States, but only through a door so narrow it barely counts as open. Regulators worked out a special arrangement tied to Japan. Fugu may be imported, but essentially only when it has been cleaned and certified by licensed experts in Japan first, and only through a tightly controlled supply chain. For a long stretch, that meant nearly all the legal fugu in America arrived through a single approved pipeline, feeding the handful of restaurants permitted to serve it. What that means in practice is a paper trail longer than the supply chain itself. The fish is cleaned and certified in Japan by people the American government has never met, under a system it has simply agreed to trust. The certificates travel with the shipment. Customs inspects the paperwork, not the fish. And the restaurants waiting at the other end are a short and very well-known list. Chefs who trained specifically for this in cities big enough to sustain a dish that most of the country will never order once. Step outside that chain and you are not committing an ordinary food safety violation. You are selling an unapproved poison. The penalties are written accordingly. So in a country of hundreds of millions of people, legal fugu is something most Americans will never see on a menu. It exists in a few high-end restaurants in a few big cities, served under rules stricter than almost any other food in the country. You cannot buy it in a supermarket. You cannot order it online and have it shipped to your door. And that's the paradox America never quite resolved. It didn't ban fugu outright. It did something almost stranger. It decided the fish could be trusted, but only barely, and only under supervision tight enough to make the risk somebody else's responsibility. So here's where the evidence actually leaves us, and it's not where most people assume. The popular image of fugu is Russian roulette, a dish where every bite might be your last. That image is mostly wrong. In a licensed restaurant with a trained chef, fugu is remarkably safe. The famous deaths almost all trace back to two things: amateurs preparing it at home and people deliberately eating the poisonous liver to chase a thrill. The restaurant plate is not the danger. Overconfidence is. The other thing we get wrong is that faint tingle on the lips, the sensation devotees prize as proof of authentic, slightly toxic fugu. Many experts will tell you that properly prepared fugu should carry essentially no poison at all, and that chasing the tingle means deliberately chasing a dose of a lethal neurotoxin. The thing the connoisseurs romanticize is, medically speaking, the first symptom of poisoning. And then there's the third myth, which is the strangest of the three. If you have ever heard of tetrodotoxin outside of a Japanese restaurant, there's a decent chance you heard it attached to zombies. In the 1980s, a researcher came back from Haiti claiming that powders used in local ritual contained pufferfish toxin, and that this was the pharmacology behind The Walking Dead. It made for an extraordinary book. It did not survive scrutiny. Other scientists tested the samples and found the toxin either absent or present in amounts far too small to do anything to anyone. The zombie theory is not settled science. It's a story that a real poison got attached to, because the real poison was already frightening enough to carry it. Which tells you something about how we handle this fish. We keep reaching for a bigger story than the one we already have. And maybe that's the real story here. Not a fish that kills people. A fish that reveals something about people. Our strange hunger to stand right at the edge of danger, as long as someone we trust is standing between us and the fall. The poison was never really the point. The trust was. Fugu has been feared, banned, licensed, studied, and quietly tamed, And after thousands of years, people still line up to eat it. It killed a national treasure who thought he was immune. It's forbidden to an emperor. It crosses into America through a single guarded door. And now, science can strip away the very poison that made it legendary, if we'll let it. The emperor is still forbidden. The farms are still quietly raising fish with nothing left in them to fear. And somewhere tonight, in a room with warm light and a dark plate, someone is paying more than they can comfortably afford for the privilege of trusting a stranger holding a knife. Every safety system we have ever built comes down to that in the end. Someone trained, someone watching, someone who could cut one corner tonight and simply doesn't. Not bad for a fish whose entire appeal is that it might kill you. If you made it this far, subscribe and tell me one thing in the comments. Knowing everything you now know, would you eat it? Next week, we open another file. Until then, mind what's on your plate.